Thank you, Mr. Haridhal. I didn't realize that you overshot time. Actually, I was really enjoying the first part that the government itself is so sensitive to the requirement of in the drone industry and also the usage and also counter usage that that we are talking about. And the drone policy itself is an opportunity for the industry, also threat for people who are going to deal with the drone threats and also those who are going to be denied the legitimate use of the drones. So it actually leaves us not to think so simply about drones, but I think it is creating a lot of complications for the policymakers and for those who are interested with the defense of borders. The defense of borders, really speaking, is a subject where there are a lot of privileges that the security forces or the defense forces, even the border guarding forces enjoy, because anything beyond a line defined is your adversary, you can shoot it. And anything this side, you have to really have a discretion because it could be a drone, which is your own lifeline. So over a period of time, when we have the drone industry providing for our domestic requirements, including the requirement of our own security forces to provide logistics and support. On the other side, you will have a big challenge as to the drone which is approaching a sensitive area. Is it your friend or foe? So that's going to be a huge challenge. And for anybody who is into the air defense, has a main issue of not only detection, but also after detection, identify it being a friend or foe, as they say, whether it should be a weapon tight or weapon loose. If it is weapon tight, then it means it is a friend. If it is a weapon loose, it means anybody, I don't know. If I don't know, then you shoot. When in doubt, shoot. So, those are the kind of challenges which are going to come in. And when Dr. Arshad Mehta was talking about the smartness in the drones, cognitive and the artificial intelligence part, where the drones are going to start behaving differently at different spots. They're going to change the complexion, what they, are coming with, and control systems are going to also vary from time to time. How a drone, if comes into a territory undetected, would be possibly seen as a drone which is already operating in the land. Even though the drone policy talks about the green zone, the yellow zone, and the red zone. But really speaking, in theory, it looks quite clear. But in practice, I think it is going to be a bugger's battle for those who are being interested with the defense of the borders. And I suppose, as and when the human challenges are going to increase, it is the artificial intelligence and robotics which are going to step in. And we have no option but to create smart frontiers. And when you create smart frontiers, of course, you can create smart frontiers on a defined coastal areas and defined international borders, line of control or line of actual control. But what do you do when there is no distinction between a drone which was registered in our own country and then it flies across, it gets loaded and comes back and becomes an adversarial drone? Something which is registered initially, but then is exported by flying and then gets loaded and comes back and attacks those who think could be their own registered element or entity flying into your own area. So that's going to be a huge challenge. Also, I'm very happy to announce that we also are joined with the staff from the Integrated Defense Staff. We have a new section there, or a directorate there, which is Technology and Innovation. They are the ones who are listening in very keenly on what the industry and the scientific community provides and contributes towards indigenization and technology development in not only the drone or counter-drone subject, but also largely how the technology is going to be integrated into the use by the defense forces. But having said that, today, when we have three speakers who are serving the Army, Navy, Air Force, heads of the air defense, and we also have with us Shri Jayanto Chaudhary, who was entrusted with the responsibility of protection of various critical infrastructure and understanding how the technology can be utilized by anybody for gain or for pain. And therefore, in the smartness of this technology, how is the critical infrastructure going to be protected? What are the threats to it? And how in the gray zone, or as we say, hybrid warfare, this kind of a menace is going to be, handled by the internal security agencies. But I will start with the head of the Army Air Defense, that is the direct DG of Army Air Defense, Lieutenant General Sunil Puri Goswami, VSM. Of course, he has served in the Army Air Defense, and he got commissioned from, being an alumni of NDA and IMA in 1984. And he's done a number of courses, a long gunnery staff course, Defense Services Staff College, HDMC, and also is a graduate of Indian Institute of Public Administration. He served in Botswana in the Indian Army training team. He's also handled logistics in Nagaland and J&K, and is currently heading the Army Air Defense as its Director General. I would request General Goswami to give his presentation. And at the end of the presentation, before we go on to the Navy and the Air Force and Shri Jayanto Chaudhary, we would request him to take on questions after his own presentation. And then we would, open the house for larger discussion. So in a way, I'm going to combine both these sessions, session 3 and session 4, because largely they talk about security concerns of the defense and the security forces at large. Over to Lieutenant General Sunil Puri Goswami, the DG of Army Air Defense.
Thank you, General Pannu, and thank you, USI and Security Watch of India, for giving me this opportunity to speak to you on how the Army Air Defense looks at this subject. Firstly, a word about the Army Air Defense. Army Air Defense are the lone ground-based air defense professionals in this country who have career officers only looking at this domain throughout their career. During their career, they look at air defense ballistics, radar technology, missile technology, the automation requirements related to the control and reporting, which results into a positive air defense control, and so on. We have a state-of-the-art training establishment at Gopalpur in Odisha, which looks at our training needs. With that, I'll start with the subject proper. The drones, the RPAs, the UAS, that is unmanned aerial systems, UAVs, or unmanned combat aerial vehicles, are just a few names. The canvas that has been painted for this seminar started off by talking of the US strikes on the ISIS in Afghanistan today morning. That means that the threat at the topmost level is of the variety of the drones or the UAVs or the UCAVs, like the Anka TB2 Bayraktar Evinci of Turkish origin, Winglung 2 CH4 CH5 of the Chinese origin, the Predator Reaper variety of the US origin, and closer home, the Barak UCAV that Pakistan is developing. And at the bottom of this threat is the threat that has been talked of till now. Sadly, any debate on a counter drone or a drone system is always hijacked towards what is more seen in the media, the small quadcopter variety of drones, and the real meat, which is the real threat, especially from the military point of view, is often left out. Therefore, there is a very serious need to examine the military threat or examine the threat that is over the complete spectrum that we just counted. Interestingly, when we talk of threat definition, it starts from the threat in being, that is threat that is in numbers, threat that exists at the enemy's locations or the terrorist locations, and the characteristics of this threat in terms of quantity and quality. The various aspects of the characteristics involve the radar cross-section, which has been talked often today, the IR signatures, the launching arrangements, the type of controls, the endurance, the purpose, and finally the application methodology. What I intend talking about is just a part of this. However, from the ground-based air defense professionals' point of view, how this entire threat is going to manifest itself is of crucial importance to all of us. And while the threat, as it has been painted, appears very overwhelming, but when we start analyzing the threat in the form that it's going to manifest itself, it will give us some sense or some direction for evolution of the counter drone strategy or the capabilities that we need to equip at each level of the security setup, whether it is the private security or the VAVP security, the VIP security, or the security that is required by the paramilitary forces, or what is required by the air defense setup of the services. When we start talking of air threat manifestation, this is finally has a range and altitude matrix to it. At the bottom lies the low level altitude, wherein we can restrict it to about 1 kilometer or 1.5 kilometer. Within this low level altitude, we need to separate out an ultra low level altitude of about 300 meters or say 1,000 feet. Whatever has been talked since morning has been mainly what is operative in this 1,000 feet, while everything else above is left out. The medium altitude ranging from 1.5 to about 4.5 to 5 kilometers, and the highest altitude that is beyond 5 kilometer. Today, the UCAVs are operating up to an altitude of 9.5 to 10 kilometers. And each of this altitude has a range implication to it. Very interestingly, when we now start distributing the threat that I talked of initially, the characteristics and the load, whether weapon load or whatever payload a hostile drone or a UAV carries, we will be able to tailor-made our requirement for each of the separate brackets that I talked of. In counter drone, it is not one size that fits all. We will require separate systems for mitigating each of these bracketed threats. The evolution of the counter drone strategy must take along the surveillance and detection, the threat mitigation instrument, and the airspace management or the airspace control instrument, what in our parlance we call as control and reporting setup. The issue of surveillance and detection has been talked a lot, especially regarding the lower altitude. But when we talk of the highest altitude, we are looking at UAVs which are having a wingspan of about 20 meters plus and are carrying precision weapons. These UAVs are operating not in very large numbers. They have a radar signature or RCS, say in case of the Chinese one of CH4, CH5 variety with the aluminum body, it comes to about 2.46 in a crosser form, and in head-on it will be a little less. The interesting portion is most of the radars are able to catch on this kind of RCS. So it is not that all the UAVs are invisible to radars. The UAVs that I talked of initially, of Turkish origin, US origin, which are carrying precision weapons, having all up weight of more than 1,000 kg, carrying about 450 to 500 kgs of payload, having 6 to 8 hard points. Each of them may be carrying a bomb or a missile, which is a standoff weapon. These very UAVs are made to operate at lower altitude because of the weapons that they need to carry and are not of the precision variety. There's an overlap in the medium altitude. All the ISR UAVs are operating in the altitude of 4.5 to 5 kilometers, carrying payloads of SAR, that is synthetic aperture radar, or ELINT equipment, or even electro-optical equipment for day and night surveillance. When we come down to the lower altitude, that is where we come down to the mini UAVs, not the nano and micro ones. Nano and micro ones will have to even operate lower. They will be the ones, along with the quadcopters, which will be sharing somewhere the ultra low level space. While I understand that for purposes of counter-terrorist threat, this is a very, very crucial height band. And therefore, the proliferation of weapons to counter this kind of threat has to be the largest. The interesting portion is that these nano, micro, mini quadcopters or the UAVs are the ones which have the lowest RCS and are operating at lower altitude, thereby complicating the radar pickup. While radars can pick up the RCS of up to 0.05, the altitude at which they operate will restrict the pickup because of the curvature of Earth and because of the features that exist on the Earth or the vegetation and the tree lines, etc. In addition to the radars, we have the passive RF detectors. A word about the passive RF detector. The passive RF detector must give us the location of the flying object in a consumable form, not in lat long, not in altitude in meters. It should be available in form of bearing or elevation so as to cue a weapon system straight away. The kind of response time that is expected of any air defense setup to mitigate this threat is minimal, is in terms of seconds. And therefore, the information that is provided should be in consumable form. Since the bracket in which they operate in terms of range and altitude is usually in the range of electro-optical systems, so a good sighting system with day and night capability, which can look comfortably up to 7 to 8 kilometers, should be able to zero it on to the target. However, talking of an electro-optical system, an optical camera or a day camera or a night camera being used for surveillance is not palatable because of the field of view that it provides. However, it can become an aid for surveillance to a man. So, use of electro-optical systems for laying the threat mitigation instrument onto the target is a must. I've had interactions with a number of vendors on the issue of surveillance solutions, on the issue of threat mitigation instruments. Many of them were actually providing only jammers. The threat mitigation instrument, to start with jammer, has a serious need of a defined beam width, and therefore there is a lot of antenna theory content that needs to be built in. A rod antenna providing a kind of geofence will also deny you the opportunity to use those frequencies which are being jammed. If it is acceptable, then that is the solution. However, jamming as a solution, as has been talked by previous speakers also, I don't give it a very long life because of any of the rogue drones which mean business. Either they are programmed to go back home or they are autonomous. Usually, the jamming solutions that are being provided by the industry are in sub 6 gigahertz range. Military grade UAVs are already having their communication links beyond 6 gigahertz. And of course, the satellite ones are going into much higher frequency ranges. The next directed energy weapon that I want to talk of as a threat mitigation instrument is the laser. Laser has a serious implication of dwell time on the target. The coherence of the beam and the dwell time on the target will define how quickly the laser is able to destroy the target. Present developments are restricted to 5 kilowatts, going up to 10 kilowatts, and whatever is being offered from abroad also is in 10 to 15 kilowatt ranges only. The issue of dwell time on the target is also related to the material of the target. A hardened material will have a larger dwell time. The next directed energy weapon is high power microwave, which is most of the places is presently at developmental stage. So I would just like to highlight that high power microwave also have a very serious connect to the antenna technology. The HPM will provide to be a very serious answer to the swarm threat. The next instrument that I want to talk of among the hard kill is the conventional small arms. Small arms provided with a good air defense sight, which is providing a solution depending on the rate of change in bearing and elevation, and providing a solution for the range of the target, will give good dividends. And in case there is fragmentation ammunition available, then certainly the dividends will be multiplied. As far as the air defense weapon systems are concerned, electro-optical fire control systems make the engagement hands-free, and already the high rate of fire along with fragmentation ammunition is creating a situation for a shot kill, provided it is up to an altitude which is manageable by the gun systems. There are certain missiles that are being offered by many of the countries which are provided with a terminal guidance towards the end. And in case the drone changes course after the missile has been launched, the missile becomes is able to change the course because of the terminal guidance which is internal to the missile. However, the most crucial threat and the most crucial solution in the low bracket and in the ultra low level bracket have to be proliferated in sufficient numbers because of the limited ranges. What the speaker from Singapore, Mr. Sam, had brought out regarding creating a geofence with number of systems, that is the usual way of deployment of any air defense system as per the ranges of threat mitigation that weapon system provides. And different sighting setups are used based on the terrain so as to ensure that no site offers a complete blind zone to the weapon system. Having talked of the range and altitude matrix, when we situate the range and altitude matrix to the threat mitigation solutions that we are looking at, we put the range and altitude correction, the altitude matrix on the x-axis, and on the y-axis, we put the surveillance systems that are required, the threat mitigation instrument that is required, and the kind of air defense control that is required. Then you will realize that at the lowest level, the air defense control has to be totally positive. There has to be complete decentralization. Most of the target engagement in this ultra low level will be dependent on the target behavior, and therefore absolute hostile criteria must be laid down. However, in use of hard kill instruments, there is a serious limitation. The hard kill instruments, while managing the air defense control, are spelled out that up to 300 meters you can carry out an engagement. However, the bullets and the fragments don't stop at 300 meters. They will go all the way up, and therefore the air defense control will have to seriously lay down procedures for altitude distribution. A point regarding the airspace management. The airspace management in our current setups is a combination of procedural and positive control. I'm sure the next speaker from the Air Force, my friend AVM Saju, will throw more light on it, since it is totally their domain. But the crux of the airspace management should be maximum decentralization. A point that had come up in the previous sessions was related to the identity of the flying object. In case all the flying objects that are being licensed are endorsed to have a self-revealing transmitter like a cell phone on board and is dependent on the cellular network, it will help us tremendously in providing a positive air defense control. Another issue that had come up was regarding air traffic management. There is a serious requirement for all drone operators who are specially operating beyond visual ranges to have a clear airspace picture to avoid any hazard avoidance. I mean, to create, obviate a situation of collision. And such kind of panels with airspace picture in the area of interest will have to be provided to the drone operators. And finally, a word about the red, green, and yellow zones. All the red zones must be provided or must cater for a integrated counter drone solution. In case they are just dependent on it being declared a red zone, then there is no point of it to be declared as a red zone. A red zone promulgation must be accompanied by that VAVP equipped with an integrated counter drone solution. That is all that I have. Thank you. If there are any questions, I will take on now or at the end of the session, as the chair desires.
Thank you, General Goswami. Excellent description about various threats, and then you being a professional Army Air Defense professional. I would expect actually some questions to come as far as the frequency and the altitudes management is concerned, and also you described very clearly that describing zones is not enough, but what you do in the zones and that technology which will support the prevention of any drone attacks is extremely important. So I see Harry wanting to ask a question. Harry, please go ahead.
Yeah, a question for General Saab is that when you say you interacted with a lot of people who are providing solutions, where if you remember the early part of the conference today, Amber Dubey said that we had insisted on made in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat and all that. We realized that is stifling the industry, so we've given the Prime Minister has come out with a new policy, which has given a free this thing. Is there any reason why the defense services are insisting on 40%, 60%, 80% indigenous this thing? Because what's beginning to happen is, from what little I understand, it is escalating the cost of the product.
Sir, the question is beyond my pay grade. It has been laid down in DAP 2020 as to what is the indigenous and foreign content that is expected for us to purchase. And it is not that we have been we have totally denied any purchases from outside. The criteria of global purchases and handshakes with foreign vendors is still going on. There have been demonstrations of drone-on-drone systems wherein a radar-controlled drone with radar is firing a net to capture the victim drone. There's another one wherein the assassin drone or the killer drone is carrying a very heavy instrument and it carries out collision. In addition, a number of jammers and GPS spoofers have been as an outcome of an handshake between the foreign vendor and the Indian vendor. But the requirement of the content is what it is.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question? If there is none, then yes, Sam, you have a question?
Yes, sir. Thanks for sharing on your military experience on the point defense and aerial defense. So because this is one of the ideas that I'm thinking for the commercial, for the police application, maybe you can share a bit more, because sometimes we felt for counter drone, we probably had to put the aerial defense and point defense together. So I think a lot of air defense experience could be put into the use.
Do you want me to respond on that?
Yes, yes.
I thought that was a statement. That was a statement. Anyway,
Yeah.
there is a lot of air defense activity that we carry out on the VAVPs in the hinterland, which are as important as nuclear installations or the ceremonial parades and the ceremonial events that you see. So we are carrying out, but yes, we are progressively graduating our capabilities towards this new threat that is coming in. Presently, our prime kill instruments are hard kill instruments, and we are graduating towards this setup. In our good old days, which all veterans will recall, we used to have a system of air sentries for this low level or ultra low level threat that you talked of, or that has been talked of since morning today. That instrument of air sentries equipped with more technology in terms of better electro-optical setup will be able to alert the system. Depending on the threat visualization that we have, we define our states of readiness. And this can very well be incorporated into the defense of the VAVPs. However, it will be manpower intensive. That is all that I have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, General Goswami. It is very interesting when you talk about technology and the threats that are in being, and you're matching it up with the conventional, way of doing things. But what is important is that the drone itself is a multi-resource platform. It can actually come in as an ISR and a communication device, and then quickly go into the RSTD, that is the recce surveillance and target designation, and somebody else takes on the target. The actual attack will come from somewhere else, and the target designation can be done by a drone. And also the same platform can go into a direct opportunity attack. So when you have number of flying objects, some are fixed wing and some are rotary wing, and some are like quadcopter with very, very low signature. I think combination of all this creates a huge amount of problem. And I suppose the security forces, largely if I club Army, Navy, Air Force, and the internal security operators, I think has to really come together with a commonality of way of doing things. I will quickly now go on to Rear Admiral Vikram Menon, who's the ACNS at Naval Headquarters, a Sea Harrier pilot, fighter pilot in a frontline squadron. He's been the executive officer of a guided missile destroyer, a commanding officer of a fast attack craft offshore patrol vessel, and at Air Headquarters, he has also been in the acquisition wing. I look forward to listening to the ACNS at Naval Headquarters, who is currently charged with the responsibility of air defense. Over to Rear Admiral Vikram Menon.
Thank you very much, General Pannu. Good afternoon, everybody. Let me first thank all the speakers who have come in earlier for very clearly elucidating the various aspects of the challenge which are posed by us today. Many aspects actually, I think the major takeaway for me today was that I was making more notes from the experts in the field, and obviously which we would like to plow back into our analysis at the headquarters. Having said that, General Goswami was actually extremely clear and elaborate on the whole process of air defense, and I would like to probably avoid, to the extent feasible, repeating certain aspects which are common to us in the Navy, but maybe talk more in a maritime domain per se. Mr. Amber in the morning was actually very, very clear when he brought out the policy, the present thrust of the government. So obviously, as stakeholders in the security paradigm today, there is no doubt that we have to understand where the nation is moving in terms of proliferation of drones in the country. And obviously, we need to adapt and gear up so that we continue to provide the necessary security cover. Having said that, obviously, when you would have a certain proliferation across the board for various requirements, there would come challenges, and this is really where it becomes a slightly more complex paradigm. From the Navy perspective, I would like to just throw up two specific areas where the challenges are really clear. Coming to our air stations, typically a lot of our air stations are joint user airfields. So obviously there is a large quantum of civil aviation which operates out of that with passenger movement. We are also co-located in large cities or fairly large towns, and the proliferation of the built-up area very, very close to the the perimeter of the station adds to the complexity. Therefore, while we do have a certain policy which has been put in, I do believe that the way forward would be that the security stakeholders would have to be working in absolute close concert with the policy drivers so that we are able to understand the specific needs of each and ensure that the job gets done. For us, we are looking at various anti-drone measures. General Goswami was talking about it. We have worked very closely with the DRDO to understand the system they were developing and also further tailor make it to our requirement. And I would say that that's been one of, at the risk of sounding a little premature, but one of the success areas where we were able to actually work with them and get a system fairly comprehensive, which we feel would moving forward meet all our requirements. In this area, of course, one large aspect which we are going to be working at as we induct these systems is going to be the risk of collateral damage when you are with built-up areas. And Mr. Soon was extremely clear when he explained the whole concept of the detection, the jamming, etc. And I think that's going to be an area where it's going to pose a very, very clear and present challenge to all of us as we ensure that in ensuring the security of our vital installation, at the same time, the risk to the common man outside the perimeter, who is probably just going about his daily chores, is not affected. This is obviously going to require a very, very strong SOP to be put in place with the coordination of the local, civil administration, the air stations, etc., so that we have a synergized approach to any sort of threat which emerges. I would thereafter like to just touch upon the maritime scenario a little more specifically. All our naval ports are, absolutely alongside major cities today. And obviously, the movement of our ships in and out of harbor, we have over the last 2 decades put into place very strong force protection measures as the ships leave through a very dense environment with fishing boats and other unidentified vessels as we leave harbor. We are all aware of the asymmetric attacks which had occurred on the US naval ships and the kind of change that brought into the defense on board ships over the years. I think the present drone technology and the kind of threat it poses is certainly going to complicate that matter. We are looking at it very, very closely in the Navy as to how we get a system, because it's one aspect to be in an air station or in a fixed installation where you have a radar operating, and you pick up a threat at a 4 or 5 or 6 kilometer distance, and you are able to react to that. But let's paint a scenario out of a busy harbor where you've got literally hundreds of boats. We all know how difficult it is to identify a potential hostile boat. The memory of 2611 still remains strong. And obviously, within that, to be able to identify a potential operator who's going to launch a drone onto us would become a very potent risk. Towards this, our ships also are looking at a very similar integrated system, which will, I'm sure, come in due course, where we have a good mix of detection as well as soft kill, as well as hard kill measures with directed energy weapons. General Goswami did bring out that one of the areas where we need to move forward is the capacity of DW, where we are still at maybe 2 or 5 kilowatt capacity. And I think to be able to, in a scenario like this, to be able to prosecute a target, we would have to actually increase that capacity so that we are able to meet, go beyond that distance. Having said that, at open sea, I mean, I'm not going to touch upon the air defense. AVM Saju will talk about it. But for a fleet out at sea, very recently we had the attack on a tanker, the Mercer Street, an Israeli-operated tanker with suspected Iranian drone attack. And we all saw the effect of that, where you were actually able to get a drone to hit a specific point of the ship. And today, that's where the technology is going. You have the capacity for swarm drones. You have them with the capability with AI to actually target specific sections of the ship, and which obviously means that the anti-drone system, coupled with your existing close-in weapon systems, etc., have to be able to ensure that we neutralize the threat well in time. That's an area where I think we have to work very, very closely with the DRDO and other agencies who are developing such systems, so that we are able to be ready to counter such aspects. Moving forward, I think one of the biggest challenges in this field is going to be that the change in the pace of technology is always going to have security agencies, etc., on the catch-up curve, because the procedures which are involved and the necessary work which needs to be done both in the R&D, we are always catching up to the scenario, and that's something that probably we would have to work with the R&D agencies. This has been one of the aspects which at the Naval Headquarters we have looked at very closely and said that we must move with DRDO, give them the kind of concerns we have, so that they are able to be ready and develop to our requirements which we foresee into the future. Because if not, the way this technology is proliferating, I think the risk to assets, both fixed on land as well as sea, remain extremely potent. Having said that, actually, a lot of the points which I had actually thought of bringing out have already been covered by the various speakers. I think only in terms of technology, some of the aspects which we must certainly look out for in the future is to adapt. We need to adapt to the drones. Today we have GNSS jammers, etc. But moving forward, you could have multi-cognitive global positioning system avoidance. And these are areas which we would have to look at so that we continue to remain capable of detecting and neutralizing targets. The other aspects which some of the speakers brought out was obviously the DigiSky app, which clearly brings out each drone which is available in the air at that point, and how we are able to identify and classify it as a potential hostile target or not. I think this is an area which is going to be a continuous work in process. It's never going to stop, and that's something that we need to actually hit the ground running on immediately, because the policy in place, the drones are going to be up in the air soon, and obviously we need to be in a position to handle that. With that, I'd like to stop here, and Pannu sir, if there are any queries specific to the Navy, I could probably add on to avoid repetition of what has been said earlier.
Thank you very much, Veer and Admiral Menon. I think, Navy being very unique, as they call it, a silent service, protecting the sea frontier. And I think when you have smarter systems there, it is not only the coastline, which is definitive, but the number of vessels which are actually operating can also have the drones mounted on them, and unsuspecting attacks can come from, aerial platforms which are born out of the platforms at sea, even unsuspecting fishermen boats. So really speaking, it makes the entire gambit of counter-drone extremely, extremely serious and complicated. But I suppose somebody might have some specific questions from you. So I will just look for an opportunity in case somebody has. So yes, I think we have R.K. Narang wanted to ask you a question.
Sir, thank you. Thank you for very bringing clarity on what is the requirement of Navy. Would like to understand what are the challenges in integration of a small counter-drone system on a ship. And second question is, tomorrow when digital sky comes up, your land-based locations, how is your air defense and preparing for that? And secondly, how do you expect industry to cater to digital sky integration in your air defense ecosystem? Thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Narang, if it's okay, I think the DigiSky integration into the air defense system, I could probably pass that on to AVM Saju, because the IAF does take the lead on air defense, so I think he would be able to give you a more holistic picture. However, let me specifically talk about the challenges on board a ship. Firstly, let's look at the platforms as they are today. To have these kind of systems to be integrated onto an existing platform, there is always going to be restriction of space. The design of the ship is already been frozen, and on a commissioned ship to work on around that is going to be a challenge. Of course, moving forward for future designs, I think they will get factored in. There are other aspects of the sea state itself poses a direct threat, because a direct challenge, because you have a ship rolling and pitching, and obviously you need gyro stabilized systems which are able to give you the ability to actually lock on and prosecute a target as it comes up. I think that would probably be the largest challenge, as well as the fact that any ship has a large number of emitters, and obviously we need to deconflict that, as well as in a larger force out at sea, it's the coordination and of course that I would say that we are fairly robust in developing our SOPs for that, because of over the years the threats as they've emerged. But obviously the response of ships, specific ships, etc., has to be worked into our SOPs. I hope that answers your specific.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Mr. Harry Dhol, you have a question?
Yes, sir. Admiral Sahab, my question is a lead on from what General Pannu was talking about. When you are in the high seas, away from the coastline, do you have a system which scans small boats coming near your vessels, which could potentially be a threat? And if so, what would you like the anti-drone systems or the drones to be created on board those ships, so that they can create a sort of a security dome?
So, like I mentioned, certainly now, while the force protection measures, which are typically slightly heightened when you are leaving harbor or in the vicinity of the coast, where the traffic is higher. But once you move on to the high seas, by and large, you would have a slightly more warning from a small surface boat, either picked up visually or even by the radar. One aspect, yes, today you do have unmanned surface boats as well, which have the potential to come and ram. So this is going to be a challenge. And while we have the ability to detect this, obviously it is given that the commander at sea would have to be able he would have to take the decision to prosecute it well in time before it comes. So we have typically the red lines drawn, where if anybody comes within that, we would take the necessary steps to
if I may just expand my query, I'm looking at the USS Cole example, and I'm also looking at the Pirates example, where they have these small little boats, which are high-speed boats coming in. Do you have a system which will spot it and neutralize them? Or do you want the anti-drone system to do the needful?
No, sir, we don't. On date, short answer, we don't want we don't need the anti-drone system to do it. If it adds into the, the defense calculus, that's fine. But we already have the force protection measures in place. Like I said, the Cole incident did teach us a lot. Today, we have a specific officer who is, purely coordinating with armed sentries at all points on the ship during the critical phase of leaving, entering harbor, so that they react to any sort of situation. Any unidentified boat not classified as not hostile will be monitored, and any sort of potentially hostile intent will thereafter be prosecuted. In terms of the anti-piracy, you would be aware we've been involved now in anti-piracy operations for well over a decade, and we have that in place as well in terms of being able to detect a potential pirate vessel coming towards our ships, definitely. And of course, if we are in a convoy, then we take the necessary steps to alert the convoy we are protecting, and the specific ship which we deem to be at risk when we are.
My question, sir, is it an automatic detection or is it a manual detection?
No, the first pickup would be done on the radar and would be classified in the operations center to the ship, and thereafter passed on.
And you're able to spot the small ships on a radar?
Yes, typically the ones which are available today. But moving forward, obviously, the stealth technology it's going to be a constant challenge. It's not a rest your oars, have all solutions ready at any given time. It's going to be constant.
Right, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Rear Admiral Menon.
Thank you, sir.
I think this was a different perspective of the coastal protection, and I suppose as we go towards creating smart frontiers, we will have more autonomous systems, giving us warnings and also countermeasures. But now I'm really looking forward to listening to Air Vice Marshal Balakrishnan Saju, AVSM Vayu Sena Medal. He actually deals with air defense in the Indian Air Force headquarters. He's a fighter squadron leader with 3,200 hours under his belt. He's been flying MiG-21s, Kiran, and Bison. He has done his staff college and RCDS at United Kingdom, and has also been directing staff at College of Air Warfare. He's got a presidential award, as I said, AVSM. With 35 years of service in flying and also in air defense, I suppose he's going to be giving us a good perspective as far as the senior partner in air defense is concerned. Looking forward to listening to the Air Vice Marshal Saju. Over to you, Saju. I think you need to switch on your mic. You have to unmute yourself. Saju, please unmute yourself. No, I can't hear you, sorry.
Also the camera, sir.
No, I can see him, but do you not see him, Harry?
Can't see him, sir.
So AVM Saju, please switch on your camera. Though I can see you, but I don't know why others can't. Maybe there is a problem in the system. But at least get your audio on. No, I think you're still on mute. So what we will do is, we will go over to the next speaker, Shri Jayanto Chaudhary. Saju, you can actually just sort out your system. Let me, in the meanwhile, introduce Shri Jayanto Chaudhary, who has been the DG Police Assam and also DG NSG. He will bring in a huge perspective about how the drone threats are going to impact the critical infrastructure and how the hybrid warfare scenario is going to have a larger implication where the drone threat is concerned. How do we counter this? Over to Shri Jayanto Chaudhary. So please.
Thank you, General Pannu. Good afternoon, all participants. I'm privileged to be part of the panel for this session on drone threat to critical infrastructure hybrid scenario. The aim is to discuss whether the emerging threat of use of drones calls for a review of the current approach to protecting critical infrastructure against terror attacks and ways to mitigate the threat. Previous speakers have provided an excellent insight into developments in anti-drone technology and the evolving military doctrine in addressing the UCAV drone threat. First, to clarify what we understand by critical infrastructure. This is the information age, and cyber attacks are a major concern of the gray zone offensive. So India has a national critical information center under NTRO. For this purpose, critical information infrastructure has been identified as power, energy, banking and financial services, telecom, transport, government and strategic enterprises. Now this should work for us as well, but given the experience of the continued offensive by outfits like Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jamaat al-Mujahideen in the past 20-30 years, we may also need to add iconic historical structures and high economic value targets. So far, most attacks by these groups have been Fedayeen style or by use of explosives. And in a very few cases, vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices. Now, currently we have a tiered approach to security that looks for vulnerabilities to these types of attacks. Teams from the Intelligence Bureau periodically undertake vulnerability assessments of vital installations. Forces like the CISF are responsible for internal security along with the local police. And the NSG plan and intervention in case of a major terror attack. Several hundred such vital installations are identified for this purpose and divided into categories depending on the priority and vulnerability. In fact, if you've read the papers, NSG has carried out mock drills in several states in the past week in a number of these identified VIs. Now, modern war is technology driven, and most countries look to technology for national defense. Some of these technology solutions shared today seem extremely promising. However, we must keep in mind, as Mr. Sam Soon had mentioned, high-tech solutions call for heavy commitment of resources and therefore need to be carefully evaluated given our limited resources and the rapid rate of obsolescence. Unfortunately, the common alternative we take in internal security is what I think you military readers would describe as the Maginot Line approach. Physical security is hardened to the maximum extent possible, backed by deployment of large amounts of manpower. But if you recall the investment made by France in constructing this defense against an apprehended German offensive was successful. The Germans did not try to attack it, they simply bypassed this hugely expensive structure. Now, as we explore possible ways to mitigate the impact of potential drone attacks, let's consider the following aspects. As was described by General Goswami and the other military leaders who spoke, the conventional military response is geared to address the threat from high-tech drones intended for warfighting. As shared by them, UCAVs like the Reaper and Predator have a range of hundreds of kilometers. They fly at heights of thousands of feet and have a substantial payload capacity. However, Pak-based terror groups who operate within India are more likely to use lower-tech, commercially available micro drones. They will have shorter ranges, fly at lower heights, at slower speeds, and have limited payload capacity. Of course, even if it's just 1 kilo or 2 kilos of explosives, it can cause casualties and damage. As an asymmetric weapon, they can cause disproportionate damage if used for a diversionary attack or if the target is a highly inflammable or explosive. As was pointed out, to use these drones, attackers will need to base themselves proximate to the target. Unlike a shoulder missile, like an RPG type attack, where shoot and scoot is possible, operating a low-tech drone is likely to require a minimum amount of time on site. And of course, while today you do not require the visual observation, most of the cheaper varieties still require visual observation. So perhaps, at least in our context, much of the drones used by terror groups will require visual observation. So when agencies like the IB and NSG make vulnerability assessments, they will need to go beyond the installation and map possible launch locations in proximate areas. Several speakers refer to the zone system, and depending on the threat assessment, such mapping will need to be followed up by a surveillance plan to monitor these areas. Of course, drone traffic will differ from area to area, and these assessments will need to review the capability to monitor drone traffic in a particular area. And I think a speaker had mentioned Red Team. Yes, I think simulation exercises will be very, very important in evaluating your response and defense capability. Now, gray zone conflict seeks to inflict damage at low cost, while forcing the adversary to commit huge resources to defense. Hence, counter-drone measures have to be cost-effective. For internal security, we don't have major budgets, and if you do want these measures to be used, cost has to be a major factor. In fact, some countries have even experimenting with training hunting birds, like kites and hawks. Now, this may not be possible in urban areas, but certainly in those installations that are in rural areas, why not? After all, we are using canines for security. Now, most of the speakers have talked about technology, and rightly so. I think strengthening the local police around the installation and proactively engaging local community could supplement technical surveillance. In Assam, the State Electricity Board had funded 30 or 40 police stations in areas where the transmission lines were being stolen and power theft was common, and the results were reasonable. Similarly, when faced with repeated abduction of its executives in Assam, ONGC worked to build up close rapport with local communities who became another tier of defense. These templates can certainly be adapted for a counter-drone approach. Now, hardening and redesigning physical structures around critical structures of an installation can be considered. For example, you have against vehicle-borne IEDs, you have berms that prevent the VBID coming into the installation. Similarly, you evolve response SOPs and you get damage control equipment that can also mitigate the impact of a drone strike. Now, in a way, micro drones act like flying IEDs, and internal quick response teams will need to be appropriately trained and equipped. Please keep in mind that I'm talking in terms of the terror attacks that we are likely to face, mostly in our conflict areas and, of course, some of our metros. And this is not the locations like the airports will have perhaps a separate model. And it's not just deploying additional manpower or building more physical barriers, but a system approach. Let me share an experience from the early 90s in Assam. Pipelines were being regularly blown up by insurgent groups against crude being pumped outside the states. The initial response was conventional. Armed patrols were deployed and petroleum tracks built along the pipelines. Because of expenses, this could not be sustained, and we soon replaced these first with cheaper home guards and finally volunteer village defense parties. This was also difficult to monitor, was quite ineffective, and the recurring costs were unacceptable. The oil companies didn't want to bear it because they said that security is a sovereign function. The state said that they did not want to pay for it. So finally, a system solution was found. Sensors were fitted in the pipeline between pumping stations. These immediately signal a loss in pressure that occurs after a massive leakage of oil due to a blast and automatically shuts off the oil flow through the affected section. Crude oil loss was then minimal, and repair parties knew exactly where to go so that the pipeline could be restored without delay. Militant attacks on pipelines almost ended, since the impact of their efforts were not enough to be newsworthy, which is always a primary objective of a terror attack. Let me sum up. Vulnerability assessments of vital installations needs to identify launch sites beyond the installation. Just as you have a counter-sniper plan, you similarly identify launch sites. Mapping an anti-drone security grid needs to be followed up with a surveillance plan, taking advantage of any zone area that has been drawn up. A more detailed survey, of course, can be carried out by those VIs which are assessed as most vulnerable to drone attacks. Technology countermeasures against low-tech drones likely to be used by terror groups in India needs to be cost-effective. Non-technical innovations must also be explored. Strengthening local police and enlisting community support could add defensive tiers to any counter-drone plan. Redesigning structures, SOPs, and appropriate training and equipment for QRTs could strengthen mitigation measures. These are some of the thoughts. General Pannu, thank you very much, and USI, thank you very much for including me in this very, very interesting panel. Back to you, General Pannu.
Thank you very much, Jayanto Chaudhary, sir. You have brought in a very different perspective. Here you're actually not only talking about technology, which you covered very clearly about how to protect our vital installations and what is the philosophy behind it, but I think you've also given out certain challenges and alternatives to how the machine-man teaming can be done and how regulators can look at things more practically than to just about rely on technology. But I suppose wholesomely, the policymakers, the regulators, man on the ground, and the machine have to come together to protect our vital installations, because after all, the threat, which is hybrid in nature, is not very easy to recognize, threats easy to identify and also mitigate. So thank you very much for bringing in a great perspective. Are there any questions to Shri Jayanto Chaudhary?
I have a small question, which was, Mr. Chaudhary, how would you look at protecting CIPs and VIPs in this scenario? As you see, someone mentioned that the drones are going to have an AI into it, and they're going to have counter measures for drones.
For VIP protection, they are usually using the technology that has been shared. You use jamming devices, you use spoofers. So that's the kind, and of course, they also use some physical shields and so on. Most of the drones so far that have been attempted have been smaller, of the smaller variety. And at least in India, the area security that's provided to a VIP, the area security, the way we can stop traffic and screen areas, around the VIP's route. I'm not sure whether you have that in all countries, but in India, we certainly have that facility of being able to do that.
Okay.
And I think I would also say that it is not only to kill the drone or neutralize the drone, also it is to catch the perpetrator red-handed, or even later, once they are caught and are punished. I suppose internal threats would that way not be handiwork of people who will be emboldened because they cannot be identified and caught. So I suppose this is where Samong had also mentioned about trying to identify a person who's flying the machine. That is what I think would be also very important for the internal security. If there are no more questions, thank you, Jayanto Chaudhary, sir. Please stay back because we later on are going to go into a larger question session.
Sir, I have one small question, if you allow me.
Yeah, please go ahead, Mr. Narayan.
Sir, my question is, now today, if police or other security agencies other than the military are going to go for drone systems, what challenges do they see? How are they going to integrate with the overall air defense network or the counter drone network? And how is it going to, how are they thinking of, cooperating with the existing air defense network? Thank you.
I think that's I think one of the best questions that has come up today, because when we are talking about the use of drones, it's not only the military use, you have civilian use. You're even talking about having pizzas deliver drones. So at least in the internal setup, it's going to lead to a lot of coordination, technical coordination, and I think a very complex ATC type structure. I think it's still in the. I think it's still in the works, but this is certainly, at least in the cities, it's going to be a very, very important issue to flag. Over to you, General Pannu.
Thank you very much, Jayanto Chaudhary, sir. I look forward to now listening to Air Vice Marshal Saju, AVSM and VM. I have already introduced, I suppose, his audio video.
Am I audible now?
Yes, you are audible. You can please go ahead.
Yes. At the outset, sir, good afternoon to everybody, and I want to thank USI, General Sharma, SWI, and General Pannu, the chair, in particular, giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts on and give an IAF perspective. I think since morning, we have had a number of speakers who talked about the technology which is there, the threat which drone as ecosystem has brought today forward. I will try and share my viewpoints on this. If you look back, it's been about a decade that the drone technology has really grown. But two significant events took place in the recent past. First is
can I request you, AVM Saju? I know you're using your laptop and your mobile together. Can you pick up your mobile closer to your, yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Closer to yours. Yeah, please.
Is this better?
Yeah, better. Thank you.
Okay, I have some technology issues with my laptop, so I'm sorry to use a combination of both these things. So there are two events that in the recent past which have really shaped the way we are looking at this particular technology or this ecosystem that I would like to call it. First was the Aramco attack. We have had a number of videos which have been, I think, screened all through this various sessions. The Aramco attack is significant when we looked at it from the point of view of a security domain. What is important to note out here is, despite Saudi Arabia spending billions of dollars, we had the Patriot 104, which was defending that particular site. They also had a number of short-range missile systems which were deployed. They could neither detect nor prevent this particular attack, and the impact of that attack was there for all of us to assess. Almost 50% cut in their production. So it was disproportionate result which was achieved by very rudimentary use of drone technology. And the next event which actually sort of shaped was the Azerbaijan-Armenia conflict with the Nagorno. This is where the conventional domain also came into the rear. So these two events have actually made us look at this, and this has now become the buzzword. We have this particular webinar, and if you look ahead, we have two more webinars on this being conducted next week, one chaired by none less than the RM, and then thereafter we have one by the ISDM. All the three services and the other security forces have also been very proactive. We have been trying to induct these systems in the JFE, primarily because it came as a shock to us when the Jammu attack took place. Till then, we were mostly concerned with the cross-border activity the PAC-sponsored terrorist organizations resulting to in terms of carriage of arms, ammunition, IEDs across and being dropped. Many of them being brought down by our own security forces. The Jammu attack was the first time that in India we have had a direct attack using a drone on a vital installation. And that forced us into a sort of panic situation where we deployed assets at Jammu, both whatever was available with the security forces as well as with the armed forces. And that deployment continues at most of our major bases. So why is this particular thing become such a matter of concern? It is both a sub-conventional threat and a conventional threat. In the conventional, it can be used in ISR, Recce, electronic warfare measures, as well as in offensive and defensive employment. You have armed drones and of all types of varieties. Goswami referred to a number of them, and so did some of the other speakers. So this is something which will be a reality in any future conflict. You add the storm drone capability, and with China being one of the leading manufacturers, and some of the others or the speakers often talk about almost 80% of the global industry being monopolized by China. So storm drone threat in a future conflict is going to be a reality with both our adversaries. And China is very actively sharing this technology with Pakistan. Pakistan, both PSC is one of the leading manufacturers in the low-end drone technology or models and things like that. In the subconventional, it is the easy availability of this technology, the low end of training that one needs to operate this type of thing. Even our existing drone policy talks about class 10 pass as a criteria for anyone to be a drone operator. So that's the type of capability that one is looking at. You can manufacture it. It is a CKD concept today. Anybody can assemble a drone in your garage, or as we call it. I can see some of the dominant players in this particular business. Augustine is here. He is one of the pioneers in this as far as ACAS is concerned, and so as we been one of them pioneers who have helped Indian Army prepare such a number of drone systems. So it's something which is easily manufacturable. The next issue, which why drone is a threat, is the deniability factor. You can use it, no cost, nobody can attribute it, even if it is captured. There are some attempts that we are making. We are looking at a drone forensic lab to be created. NSC is working on it. Some of you may be aware of it. And the services are actively cooperating with NSCs on this. It is something that is the order of the day that needs to be done. So what are the technology that we are looking at to counter this particular threat? Often alluded to that the counter drone is akin to air defense. There are 4 steps to a counter drone strategy. It is detect, identify, track, and neutralize. So detection basically revolves around either radar, which is normally in the subconventional threat when we talk about is an X-band, typically a radar which is got a submetric 0.001 per RCS, per meter RCS, that is target system that we can detect to a range of between 10 to 5 kilometers. If I look at it from a drone terminology, which is commonly known to everybody, if you look at a micro and a nano drone, then the detection ranges are about 3.5 to 5 kilometers. And if it is on a normal drone of medium and small class, then it is of the order of about 10 kilometers. We also have the RF seekers. An array is normally which is used, and they allow you not only for detection but also for localizing the operator in case it is done. The UIR sensors, which alluded to in all the combinations that we're looking at, then they are basically used only for viewing. The technology today talks of incorporating PTZ cameras. We're looking at video analytics. We're looking at smart solutions being provided wherein target detection is possible, or even scene matching is possible in this case. So these are some of the features which we are looking at. When we come to drone countering, neutralizing is concerned, then we're basically looking at some of the hard kill options. Hard kill will be laser as the primary source. Laser in India, we have between 2 to 5 kilowatts being developed, and even 10 kilowatts being developed by DRDO. There are production agencies available. There are other vendors which are basically looking at just 30 seconds here. I just put the charger on. There are a number of players in this market who are ready to offer ready-made solutions which are basically imported from abroad. We also have now the soft kill options being offered. First and foremost, obviously, the GNSS jammer. The GNSS jammers are available from very, very low-cost solutions. And then the RF jammers. RF jammers, the 4 frequencies you're all familiar with, 433, 915, 2.4 and 5.8 megahertz. But there are also today drones which are looking at using frequency hopping or other frequencies. Why these 4 frequencies are important is because these are the unregulated frequencies which are available as per WPC, and that is why most commercial producers look at this as the solution. In Air Force, we are looking at a smart fence or a sky fence or drone fence, whatever term you want to look at, as one of the solutions. The reason is that that they offer you a low-cost solution. It's a combination of an RF jammer and a GNSS jammer, very low-powered, 1 to 2 kilometers. They would be there available, mounted on the post along a, let's say, typically an area like an airfield, and they will give you a protection like a wall, countering either an autonomous navigation jammer or even a remote controlled jammer. So these are some of the solutions. There are also some of the technologies which are being used by some of the vendors. There is an oral sensor array combination, which is not really usable in an urban environment, but definitely in a rural or even in a perimeter area, on the border areas, we can use it. They look at commonly available oral signatures of drones, and then they can be effectively used for it. We had in the recent past a number of jammers which were produced, basically GNS jammers, which are to be used for conventional or conflict. But what we have been able to do is to use the combination of this along with whatever is the RF jammers available with us as a counter drone mechanism. The only side effect of this particular employment of this jammer is that they are fairly high powered jammers. They are of the order of effectiveness up to almost 150 kilometers when you use it in a directional method. So that tends to affect civil aviation and military aviation, and therefore have to be employed in a very, very controlled manner. Whereas normal commercial counter drone jammer systems available, the GPS jammer or GNSS jammers are of very, very low power outputs, and they affect only to 5 to 7 kilometers or so. So this is one thing that we need to keep in mind. As far as our counter drone strategy is concerned, we were one of the lead agencies which we worked with NSCS and MHA in drawing up the counter drone policy for India. We shared it with the security agencies, and a number of policy guidelines have been issued by everybody. We were also asked to sort of draw up the ORs, that is the operational requirements for a counter drone systems, which we have again shared with BSF and MHA, and that is what the most of the security agencies and armed forces are laying it out in the open for other industry to respond. I had a session yesterday with ISDM. Mr. Shah is here, I think still on board. So when we discussed it and what is available in the market and what we are looking at, both are matching. So we're looking at a radar of a detection range of 5 to 10 kilometers. We're looking at EOIR detection sensor of about 1 to 2 kilometers. We're looking at jammers which are effective up to about 5 to 10 kilometers max. And we are looking at laser systems which are about 1.5 to 2 kilometers. That means about a 5 kilowatt max laser system. Our strategy revolves around categorization of all the VAVPs which are available. That means our military installations, we tend to categorize them into 3 categories: category 1, 2, and 3. Now, category 1, 2, and 3, we are looking, how do we go about categorizing? We are looking at the criticality and vulnerability of these systems. Firstly, criticality, the higher, if you have a, let's say, high-tech aircraft which is based there or a radar system which is based there, obviously the criticality of them being damaged is very high. Vulnerability, while you may have a very high-end or a high-tech aircraft based there, but if the same aircraft is, let's say, based, parked in a hardened blast pen with adequate protection, enough spacing between them, then the vulnerability factor comes down, and therefore I can then put it at a lower priority. So we have got, when we say category 1 airfield or a target or a VAVP as we call it in our terminology, then that particular system needs a comprehensive counter drone system, which means a sensor, a jammer, EOIR, and a hard kill option, preferably of the laser or even a drone, a killer drone or a net capture or whatever we want to look at it. A category 2, we are now looking at only a soft kill option, but a sensor is a mandatory thing. And category 3, we expect that the existing drone orders which are, or the policy which have been issued in terms of classification of it being a red zone and with adequate buffer around it will give it some protection. So the procedures are already there. We expect that in such an area, it is likely to be, we expect to get some sort of a early warning, and our security team will be well armed. Right now, we are looking at these priority 3 or a category 3 VAVP to be armed only purely with the indigenous or the integral weapon systems, that is the normal 7.62 or 5.56 type of guns that is there. But we are looking to expand this particular capability with drone guns, which is of an order of about 1 kilometer effective range, and that is where that will give, based on the early warning, the particular security guard with very minimal element of training, he should be able to operate that drone gun and ward off this particular threat. So this is as far as the strategy is concerned. There are 2-3 points which you alluded to where it was expected that I would answer. First and foremost, as far as DG Sky is concerned, you're aware that the drone policy has been issued and that it talks about DG Sky map, and the DG Sky map wherein all the agencies which are supposed to mark it are expected that in a period of about a month, we will all be marking. If you look at the policy, it talks about airfields and the distances. I think in the morning session, it was presented a distance of up to 8 kilometers and then 8 to 12 kilometer being talked about as yellow zone, with the red zone being a no-fly zone, and in the yellow zone up to 200 feet. That means there is no threat to aviation from that point of view. But we from the armed forces, we also look at, there are a lot of military installation, strategic installation, which also comes in the red zone. And therefore, we expect that similar precautions or similar restrictions would be there as far as those areas are concerned, and the remaining areas will remain as a green zone. Now, this green zone, it is up to 400 feet. Therefore, all that impact as far as we are concerned is that our aviations, whenever we are doing any amount of low-level training or any low-level exercises and things like that, then we have to ensure that we maintain adequate separation from this particular drone traffic in the green zone area. The other issues as far as airspace management is concerned, in the earlier policy, we had talked about all drone operations, the information being passed to the nearest air defense center, and then we were expected to classify this as a friendly or a hostile. So any movement which is not available with us, we classify it as initially unknown and thereafter as a hostile or a rogue drone, and therefore we could utilize it. With this particular policy now being implemented, we will only look at drones which are outside the green zone. While green zone, you recall that it is up to 400 feet, but keeping the entire airspace of India and at a height of 400 feet and below is a very, very challenging task. We do not have that type of extensive cover as far as the radar cover is concerned all across India, and especially when it comes to urban areas, huge challenge comes in because of the type of obstructions and things like that which are existing. So these are this is where we expect the UTM managers and the UTM operators to help us with, wherein in case there is a drone which is drifted out of the green zone, which is under their control, we expect that the information would come to us, and we in turn would now then look at either focusing our sensors towards that particular direction and then trying to fit particular. So these are some of the challenges which are ahead. This is an industry which is developing. We will the challenges is only going to increase, primarily because of swarm drone. The conventional arena, we expect it to be countered very effectively because the drones are of larger size. Our phased arrow type of technology, which is using all the air defense radars which are inducted, have got capability of detection of 0.1 square meter per. And more importantly, right through this little bit of crisis that happened after the Jammu attack, when we worked with the DRDO, some of the major developments which took place was that the operationalization of the DRDO system, identifying of production agencies will take place. We have got in our own RFI, which was issued out, we had something like 22 vendors who responded, and 12 confirmed the offers came in. So that means the industry is well tuned to addressing the concern or the requirements of the free service. The second thing which happened was that we were able to work with the DRDO and even a ADFCR radar, which was otherwise not expected to pick up a phantom Mavic or a DJI class of drone. to be tweaked, the pulse width and the SNR values to be adjusted, and they were that particular radar was able to pick up this particular drone at the same distance which a counter drone radar picked up. And that I can share with you that we have already deployed it for one of our sites. So that is a very, very welcoming progress that we made. Some challenges still exist. The drone detection radars are prone to false alarms. We are aware of it is akin to an avian radar, and therefore that is the false alarm that we will have to address. The issue of jammers affecting civil aviation and military aviation I talked about. We are also today seeing a proliferation of anti-jam, anti-spoofing GPS antennas. And it is a matter of time before these become incorporated into the drone. And that will become a challenge because most of the counter-drone systems rely heavily on the GMSS jam. So with this, I think I will stop at this stage and take on any questions in case they are with a positive time. Because I could continue on this. Just a promise that I want to make, which I shared with IBM yesterday, is that any industry partner who is available can come up to the services, and we will look at this product with an open mind, and we will refine our OR so that there are more players who meet our requirements, and therefore we will be able to conduct that system. So that is something that I would take up and down. Thank you, sir, for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, AVM. Saju, I think your last remark was very, very productive for the industry and the scientific community, both to research, develop, and also provide for to the Indian Air Force and, of course, Navy and the Indian Army. I know there will be a lot of questions, but I have one more speaker, and he is also a veteran from the Indian Air Force, Group Captain MJ Augustino, VSM. So I will get him on to speak first, and then we can have a combined question answer session where we have two Air Force experienced officers, answering the question on drones. Group Captain MJ Augustino is a Mirage 2000 MiG-21 and Airbus A320 pilot. He's also a paratrooper, and he's a drone visionary and an enthusiast. He set up a company which is Automicro US Aerotech Private Limited. I invite Augustino to please come up with his presentation, and then of course we will have a combined question answer session for the entire proceedings of the day, and also to start with the Air Force speakers. Augustino, if you're there, you can kindly start your presentation.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Good afternoon, USI. And thank you, Saju, sir, for mentioning my name, though I've changed in appearance a little. And thank you for inviting me to talk on such an important topic which the entire world is grappling with today. Secure skies, like Saju sir covered, secure skies meant that you detect, identify, either destroy or dissuade him. So the whole thing went out of gear, basically with the inclusion and for want of a better word, I'm using this word called invasion of drones into this melee. So drones was the new kid in the block who really forced us to think differently, think out of the box, and think quickly. Couple of examples which Saju sir talked about. Fortunately, I had a first-hand experience after Aramco attack. A couple of weeks later, I was there at Riyadh at Air Force headquarters. Discuss this matter threadbare with people who got hit by it badly. I gave my version, and the only question the chief had to ask me was, whom are you talking to from my officers? So it was an interesting case to analyze. It was an interesting case to put your finger on. So with that as the background, as well as some of the questions that I've noted down during the course of last 45 minutes to an hour, I would also endeavor to answer those questions. So without much ado, I'm sharing my screen. So you'll only be hearing me and seeing my screen. Can you see the screen, sir? Pannu, sir?
Yes, sir.
Can you increase the size if you can? Thanks.
Yeah. So today we're talking about secure skies. Threats typically is enemy air, surface-to-surface missiles, and now, like I said, the new kid in the block, drones. So I'm going to restrict myself talking about drones. Many people before me and many stalwarts have talked about it, so I'm not going to talk about it much. A lot of it has been covered by Saju sir previously. Detection. Let's talk about detection. One thing which Master Saju didn't touch about, I will touch on it. Radar. He said 2.5 to 3 kilometers. A drone of a size of, say, the one which was launched by FA-18, which is like a 7 inches in size. That range is about 200 meters, and equally devastating and highly a very potent precision attack weapon. So I would put the radar from the ranges of say 200 meters to 5 kilometers, maybe at best 10 kilometers. So now if we do the mathematics from 200 meters to 10 kilometers, how will you mitigate such a threat using what weapons? Then you will understand the enormity of the problem. So therefore, there is another technology which to me appears more promising than radar, but the issue is that it depends on the atmospheric conditions, the ambient noise, etc., is acoustic. The propellers make the tip of the propeller in some cases, even when the drone is smaller, can go supersonic. So the sound, especially in a particular frequency regime, is enough to pick it up. And I have gone a little technical. I have included certain slides. A lot of speakers before me talked about it, but I wanted to give you a little deeper perspective. So I included certain slides to explain the technology. This acoustics, some people claim as much as 20 kilometers of range, but I have been conservative to put it at about 5 kilometers range. So acoustics, again, up to 5 kilometers can push up to 20 kilometers. There is a lot of work that is going on. Acoustic technology is not new.
Sorry, I missed this point. Can you just explain this to me? Acoustic sensing?
Acoustic sensing, sir, it is very similar to what the SATA batteries have. I mean, if I put it very simply. You know, SATA batteries have, the moment the enemy gun fires, you are able to locate the enemy gunfire. The Indian Air Force had something called misdistance calculator. Using acoustic sensors, we could tell the guns air to ground when we did air to ground gunnery. Exactly, it told us that where the bullets went. So it is the same technology that is used. So you have these very highly directional microphones looking into the enemy area. So you are looking at something like 10 to 12 degrees or maybe at the most 15 degrees of field of view. And you've got multiples of them on the borders or in your area of interest. So say a airbase, all around the airbase looking outwards. So you are able to pick up a drone which is electronically silent and which is small, so that it is not yet been picked up by the radar, or the base does not have adequate number of radar that you will understand will be huge amount to put all across the border. So acoustics gives us a very cost-effective option of picking up a rogue drone at, the theoretical distance is about 20 kilometers. Third thing which Saju talked about was ESM, of which I have a slide. When I come to that, I'll explain it to you further. It'll become much more clear.
Sorry for asking for this question. My
Yeah.
question to you is, even the very small drones which are extremely silent can be picked up by the acoustic sensing? Acoustic sensing?
Smaller the drone, larger the range. It is that beautiful. Because smaller drone, what happens is the RPM of the motor. Let me give you a fair idea of the RPM of the motor. Bigger drone RPM is around 1500 to about 2500. Whereas the smaller drone RPM goes as much as 10,000 to 12,000 RPM. You look at the difference in the RPM. So it's like a bee. The smaller drone makes a very typical high pitch sound, sometimes beyond 20 kilohertz. So you want beyond your hearing range, but within the hearing range of the microphone. So smaller the drone, larger the range. A lot of work is happening in even our company. We are working on how to use acoustics as a technology to pick up incoming drones. But we still are at nascent stage to talk about it or do a technological demonstration. Third is he talked about ESM, but ESM is applicable only to those drones which are doing two-way talking. That means the drone is not electronically silent. Most of these drones which came to drop, whether weapons or narcotics, in Punjab and in the Jammu region, I had chance of looking at one or two of them. They were all electronically silent because in one of them there was not even a receiver, so he was completely electronically silent. So the flight path was loaded into the flight controller, and that drone followed a particular flight path, and that is it. UIR is another good option to go, but then again, I put it there. It depends on the environmental condition, weather, etc. And winters in North India, you can imagine UIR is handicapped very badly. Prosecution. A lot of people talked about this aspect in bits and pieces. So I thought I'll put all together. And also talk about one important aspect called the counter-drone drone, which there has been a little noise, but not much. It's quite muffled. Close-in weapon system to this day is the most effective system. Jamming a drone currently is possible only if the drone is electronically not silent. That means it is doing a back-to-back transmission. Spoofing, very rightly covered by Marshal Saju, that spoofing a drone is going to go out of window. It's not only anti-spoofing receivers. It is, we have developed anti-spoofing cages as well. It is like a Faraday's cage, about which probably I'll talk about later. So, we are not allowing the GPS receiver to look anywhere more than plus minus 60 degrees of the zenith. That means the spoofer energy has to come from plus minus 60 degrees of zenith, which means he has to come on top of the drone. Otherwise, the spoofer is not effective. So there's a company called Accord. I'm very sure most of you know this company. They make wonderful spoofers and jammers, but and long range ones, but theirs will not be effective come these anti-spoofing antennas and anti-spoofing cages if they come up. People are also talking about small diameters, missiles. How long the technology has matured is anybody's guess. The point which there's a lot of muffled noise, not much people talk about, is counter-drone drone. Now, counter-drone drone is something I am really excited about. I'll tell you why I'm excited about, because of the mathematics to the whole thing. Counter-drone drone is exactly like a CIWS, except that you don't have to fire so much of bullets. Now, how does a CIWS work? CIWS works by phalanx guns that Navy has. Fires a huge wall of metal, which is like expanding outwards towards the target, hoping that one of it at least will hit the target. So what happens in CIWS is that it is effective because of its rate of fire, and the number of the muzzles that it has. So it's like a wall of metal that goes towards the incoming threat. Now the issue is the number of bullets that you need to fire, and for the time that the CIWS will be effective. So a CIWS cannot be used in isolation. It can only be used in conjunction with either acoustic radar or a physical radar, which means you need to detect the drone to prosecute the drone. Whereas in a counter-drone, you can have the swarm, these small swarms of the size of a palm or maybe even a smaller than that, maybe 3 to 4 inches drones, which does not have too much of endurance. It at best will have 7 to 10 minutes endurance. But it can form a wall in the direction that the enemy drone or even an enemy cruise missile is coming from. So this technology, I'm really, really excited. There's a lot of work people are doing, especially in Europe and America, I'm aware, some of whom we have collaborated or have MOU with and collaborating with. And there's a Stanford guy whom I've been working with for past 1.5 years on this technology. Last thing which Marshal Saju talked about is training. So last month, we have embarked on a pro bono work with Kerala government, where we are part of drone forensics lab, but we have also going to roll out a training for beat cops. I feel every police station, you need to have at least one person who's trained on drone, who understand drones, and who can take certain action against rogue drones. Today, other than professionals, anyone else has little or no awareness about drones. For some of them, it's a big enigma. So all that needs to go away ASAP because of 3 reasons. A, the drone traffic, including the friendly drone traffic, is likely to increase in the country. B, you need to sift chaff from wheat, which means someone needs to know which is good, which is bad. And third, and most importantly, that if any information about drone comes to the police station, you should take appropriate action and not a knee-jerk reaction. So towards this, we have curated a course for 2 weeks. We are going to conduct it for Kerala Police starting next month. It will be open for all the security services. Now coming to a little more technological stuff. If it is going to put some of you to sleep, I would like to apologize at the outset itself. Drone locating can be done through radio direction finder, which I talked about, and also using passive coherent locating, which is possible when you do coherent location of the drone which is transmitting energy. So the frequencies Saju has already covered, starting from 433, 900, 2.4, 5.8, and custom frequencies. So all these frequencies need to be scanned, and you need to have the receivers at different geographical locations so that you can triangulate the position of the rogue transmission. Now, there is a big challenge in triangulating position of the rogue transmission in this ISM band. ISM band, gentlemen, is used, and ladies and gentlemen, is used by, there's someone's mic is on. May I request you all to just check your mic and put it to mute, please. The challenge with passive coherent locating an ISM frequency is that people using the ISM frequency are far too many. Even your own Wi-Fi at everybody's house is an ISM band, 2.4 gigahertz. The 5G modem is 5.8 gigahertz. So how will you track an ISM band? We did a little bit of work on trying to track an ISM frequency. Then we realized that without the use of AI, it is not possible to track an ISM frequency using a PCL. Because just pure RDF will give you a lot of position line, of which 99% of it will be legitimate 2.4 in an urban environment. So that is something that that people have to put a thinking cap on. I'm sure many companies are working towards it. Now, multi-location PCL is how you locate a person by triangulation. And this is not new. This is already there with SATA batteries in Army, already there with the ESM aeroplanes in the Indian Air Force, where you get location lines over a period of travel. You now get multiple cuts to geolocate a transmitter. So this thing works exactly like that. But like I said, the challenge is the number of people who are using this sub-band frequency. Marshal Saju also talked about drone guns. I feel drone gun is the way to go. Probably it will give much greater dividend than even a smart fence, because smart fence is going to not identify friend or foe. It is going to jam you and jam the enemy. So you should be prepared to jam yourself when you're doing an omnidirectional jamming or omnidirectional spoofing, which is what we found working with many of the companies. Omnidirectional spoofing is going to make you, or it's like an EMP weapon. Before you fire an EMP weapon, you have to yourself go electronically silent, otherwise you will fry yourself. So drone gun, so what we are working on is varying the FOV of the drone gun by having a variable antenna. The antenna is, when pulled back, gives you 20 degrees, and when pushed forward, gives you 1.2 degrees. So with the same amount of power, you're able to prosecute an enemy drone who's far away. So effective range of 5 kilometers in a barrage mode and in 20 kilometers in a concentrated mode. And like Saju covered, it has to be a holistic solution. It cannot be a standalone solution, or there is no panacea to this problem. It is as simple as that. All the technology has to come together to prevent. And currently, sad to say, we do not have any prevention solution. Maybe a little bit more, but a prevention solution for a Jammu-like situation. Somebody's mic has come on again. May I request you to check respective mics, please? Thank you. So this is how it looks. A typical layout of a jamming system for an airport or for an air base is something like this, for simple reason that it is a directional solution. And aim of the directional solution is not to do some, in Hindi they say Swayammangalam. So you should not be, jamming yourself. So this is very, very similar to how we position our air defense weapons around a base. Like an ACAS gun or Assam batteries around our base. So nothing major, nothing different for the Air Force. We've been doing it for past many, many decades. Homegrown system has great advantages. In fact, Pannu sir and I have had discussion on this last year, that first to market, unique, low cost, quick to develop, and Atmanirbhar Bharat, maybe it'll have a main benefit. Companies can co-develop with other companies, which I find Chinese do it very well and we do it very badly. I don't know why our startups don't come together, even though they have complementary skill sets. So this probably could be driven by the government, and this could be the takeaway by USI to the government, that complementary startups could be allowed or should be allowed to come together to work towards a common cause, like Chinese do, and Chinese do it very, very beautifully. Co-produce it with organizations like DRDO and other organizations. And we should look at technology in which we have low investment and very high return, like acoustic I talked about, where the investment is quite low, the return is quite high. Drone gun investment is quite low, the return is quite high. So we need to look at such technologies and not look at technologies which are going to cost us a bomb like a drone radar. I mean, it's in crores of rupees. So it's like taking, elephant to sort of fly. So with that, my presentation part is over. I'll quickly cover certain questions that came up, including certain aspects that Saju covered. That is talking about zones. I would, after this, whoever is listening to me, after this, if you take your map, zoom it, and put 5 kilometers mark all across the border, which is the best case scenario actually, and 200 meters mark all across the border, you will realize the amount of drone radars required for different classes of drones and prosecution weapons required for different classes of drones. It is humanly impossible to have a foolproof solution for countering drone attack against any particular target. So then the question comes, how will you classify a vital area or a vital point? Vital area, impossible. Vital point, certainly. And in this particular drone policy, they talked about a moving red zone, which is basically what one of the speakers earlier said, the HNI or a VIP. Moving red zone, how are you going to prosecute? How are you going to protect this moving red zone? That is a question that we have to sit down, industry, veterans who are working in this technology, as well as the current uniformed armed people to really give it a serious thought to avoid any embarrassment for which we will tomorrow have no answer. Low-level training, which Marshal Saju talked about, 400 feet, sir, now is going to be a sterile zone. So 150 meters and 50 meters weapon delivery, etc. One needs to really seriously look at. Probably 500-600 feet is where Air Force needs to step up. If Air Force doesn't give away that particular volume, then in my humble opinion, it will affect the progress of the country, because up to 400 feet drones are going to touch our lives like anything. I mean, Goldman Sachs report is out there. You can Google Goldman Sachs and drones. You will find it's $100 billion industry, and it is just the tip of the iceberg. It's going to be multiple times that number. Drones are touching, drones for good outweighs drones for drones against drones for military in multiple excess. So that is one area Air Force really needs to look at to give a little more elbow room for drones to play. Another important aspect which Marshal Saju mentioned, which I want to touch upon, is UTM, the unmanned traffic management. Unmanned traffic cannot be shoved into a manned traffic management zone. It is going to overwhelm the system because the unmanned traffic numbers are going to increase a lot. But the unmanned UTM, ATM handshake has to happen. And that handshake has to happen geographically. Similarly, the unmanned traffic data push, one-way data push, maybe using a USDTU or something, into Air Force network also needs to happen. So someone I need to sit down and work. First, write a policy as to how are you going to do a UTM, ATM handshake, and how will you execute this UTM data into ATM and into air defense. It is not going to be an easy task. It is going to be a humongous task, but the work has to start now. If it does not, then we will only be doing catch up and probably come down heavily on drone operations, which will affect economy of the country. I also already talked about AI and ML. I will show you an image. I'm not sharing my screen. I'll just show you an image on the mobile itself. So this is a simple image, trial which we did in Tripura. This is a drone shot, a drone image or a drone video of a mandir in Tripura. And then we had to find out how many motorcycles are there, pedestrians are there, how many people in a particular group are following. So we put artificial intelligence, machine learning to work. So I have a team working out of one of the universities, and we developed this particular project we took it up as a challenge, developed this particular project. Now you can see on my video that person, bike, everybody are separately classified, that they are classified on the fly. It is humanly impossible to do it. You have to put AI ML to work. Very similar process can be used to triangulate a moving ISM band. A moving 2.4 gigahertz transmitter needs to be isolated, not all 2.4 gigahertz transmitter. And moving also at what rate and what location. So it's humanly impossible to do it. We have to put AI ML to work. So this challenge needs to be posed by the armed forces, and industry has to take on this challenge and work towards the project. Why will industry take on this challenge? Only if a certain order is already promised by armed forces, else nobody is going to put his money where the mouth is, or his time where there is no money. That is one aspect. Then the last and final thing I want to say before I close is whatever policy we make, whatever rule we make, whatever procedures we put in place, enemy is not bound to follow, and he will not follow. So the procedure that we are making needs to be kept in mind, that our procedure needs to be so good that we are able to find out the good guys. So the only guy who's now going to stand out like a sore thumb is the bad guy. Our procedure should not be that we penalize the good guys. No. Our procedure should be such that we are easily able to identify the good guys. It is like cars flying on the road. A legitimate number plate wala car, we should be able to identify it. And no number plate wala or non-legitimate number plate wala car, we should be able to identify it. He stands out like a sore thumb. So the policies needs to be in that direction. Then only can security and economic progress can go hand in hand. If we do miss this bus of drones' economic potential, we will miss this bus forever. It is not because we had a certain rule or position in place that we are today IT leaders. It is because we didn't have a procedure or rule in place, we became IT leaders. So polity of that time did not understand the enormity of this technology. Therefore, they didn't do anything about it. And therefore, we flourished. So that is how we need to look at this whole economic potential that the drone brings to the table for the country. And with that, I rest my case, sir. I'm open to questions, both from Secure Skies point of view, as well as from the economy point of view and business opportunities point of view. Thank you, Pannu, sir. Thank you,
very
USI.
much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Augustine. We've simply overshot by about half an hour, but I see the serious players have been left behind. I think those are the ones who are into must know. I think the should know and could know have broken off for maybe post lunch siesta or a cup of tea. But I'm very happy that the serious players are here, and we will first have question answers. But just one comment, or just small few comments or points on Augustine. I think what you brought out is very interesting, that the kind of technology and the kind of drones which are going to be fielded by whoever produces it, going to throw in too many flying objects in the air, different types, different varieties, different technology. And I think this is going to be a hybrid technology at flying, and you do not know whose drone it is that day. It is yours or somebody else's or nobody, and it becomes an unidentified flying object. It's going to be a bugger's muddle if it is not regulated or if it is not understood by everybody. In your presentation, I think two things which stood out very clearly is what you said differently is sound as a base or acoustics. And you spoke about the sound ranging technology which the SATA regiments use. I think SATA also gave it up at some point because they also went into the RF signatures and the other radars. But I think it is very interesting to have sound base as one of the ranging techniques for spotting drones. And also the counter drone, because when you talk about counter space, it is a satellite kills a satellite. Satellite has something on it which even directed energy weapon. So as a result, you will find that there would be one drone and another drone chasing it and firing, or banging it itself against the other drone. Far too many things would happen. So it is interesting. Before we wind up, I will request Harry to conduct a question and answer session for about 15 minutes. And I suppose then we would have run out of our time for today's debate. Thank you very much, all in the two sessions that spoke on the smart frontiers and for protection of the critical infrastructure in the hybrid scenario.